asking you guys to send me suggestions of things you want to see me do in a video. And Alicia from one of my favorite blogs, The Red Deer, asked me to make some bread making videos. So I'm going to show you guys one of my favorite recipes from the book Artisan Bread in 5 Minutes a Day. This is the master recipe in the book. It's the first recipe. You can do a lot of things with it. I prefer to just make it plain. And I've made it 3 or 4 times already. And I prefer to make half of a recipe. And so I stuck a little post-it right in my book with all the half measurements. And the first thing we're going to need is one and a half cup of warm water. And you can get the water right off your tap, unless you prefer to use bottled water when you make bread. Then just heat it up in the microwave. Just let it get warm, and measure out 1.5 cups. And if you're not sure exactly how warm it is, just go ahead and stick a little digital thermometer in. Wait a few seconds, and mine comes up to 97, 98, 99, 100. Perfect. Okay. Now we're going to take a bowl. I find that let's see how big this is. This is a 4-quart bowl. This is big enough for a half of a recipe. So if you make a whole recipe, you want to get a really big bowl. And make sure it has a lid. But when you put the lid on it and put it in the refrigerator, you're not going to seal it airtight, just about halfway. So you're going to put your warm water in your bowl. You're going to mix everything in one bowl. You don't even need a mixer. And then the original recipe calls for 1.5 packets of yeast. So half of that would be 3/4 of a packet of yeast. And I don't know about you, but when I put 1/4 of a packet of yeast in the cabinet, I forget about it. So the first time I made it, I just went ahead and used a whole packet, and everything worked out. So we're going to put the yeast into the water, sprinkle it in. This is my favorite part because it starts to smell so good. We're going to use 2 1/4 teaspoons of salt. So where's my 1/4 teaspoon? Right here. Just so you know, it really sucks trying to measure salt out of this box. So if you're smart enough to pour your salt into a nice wide mouth jar for easy measuring, then kudos to you. But this is what I do to myself. Okay, 1 teaspoon and another teaspoon. And I know it seems really weird putting salt straight into the water with the yeast, but the yeast don't die. They're pretty resilient little creatures. And I'm going to take a spoon and stir that up for a little bit. And you don't really have to wait for it to dissolve. Now it's time to add the flour. First I'm going to measure the flour into a separate bowl because I like to add it all at once. And I'm using bread flour. And you can substitute, the recipe calls for all-purpose. You can substitute bread flour by reducing it 1/4 cup for every 6 cups of flour. The original recipe calls for 6.5 cups of all-purpose flour, but I'm not going to worry about messing around with that half cup. So I would reduce it to 6 1/4 cups for the original recipe, and for the half recipe I'm using 3 cups plus 2 tablespoons. And it specifically says to use the scoop and sweep method. And usually I'm a fan of the spoon and sweep method where you spoon the flour into the cup because it just seems easier to me. Sometimes when your bag of flour gets kind of low, it's hard to dip the cup into the bottom. But what the recipe says, Cassie does. So scoop and sweep it is. There's 2. Let me switch hands here. Get a good angle on it. And 3. Now when you scoop it and sweep it, you don't want to pack it down in by tapping on it. You can tap a few times to sort of level it all out, but don't really pack it in by tapping it. Okay, that was 3, and now I'm going to get 2 tablespoons. 1 and 2. Put my flour away. And here, you don't even have to sift. You just dump it all in. Dump in all the flour. All of the flour. And then stir. And stir. And stir. The nice thing about this is you could make this dough in the morning and have bread at night for dinner. and you don't even have to wake everybody up in the house with your loud mixer thumping around on the counter for 10 minutes trying to beat the heck out of the dough. You're not really kneading this right now. You're just sort of mixing it all together. Right now, I don't know if you can see, but the dough is pretty well mixed together, but it's got dry patches, and it's getting too hard for me to serve with a spoon. So it's time to get down and dirty. And I'm going to scrape all of this off and get rid of the spoon now. And just mix. You're not kneading, you're just really mixing. You're just trying to get all the dry patches out. Okay, and there's no more dry spots. Everything's pretty wet and mixed together. I'm just going to rinse off my hands and we're done. At this point, you're going to put the lid on and leave it out on the counter for, let's see how long. Cover with a lid that fits well, not airtight. And allow it to rise at room temperature for about 2 hours. And of course, that depends on the temperature of your room, so if you're working in a hot house, it's going to be a lot less than 2 hours. If you like it freezing cold, like my boyfriend does, it'll probably take you more than 2 hours. But right now, the house is pretty good, so it'll be about 2 hours for me. And when I come back, I'll show you what the dough looks like after 2 hours. Okay, it hasn't been 2 hours yet, but I just wanted to show you a close-up view of what the bread looks like after it's been properly mixed. And in 2 hours, it's going to be all big and puffy and foamy and ready to go into the fridge. Right now it's been about an hour, and you can see that the dough still has a lot of its shape, but it's definitely gotten a lot bigger and a lot softer. It's been 2 hours now, and you can see the dough looks almost like it's been tripled in size. It's extremely soft, and when you pinch a piece of it, you can see all the bubbles inside. And at this point, it is ready to be covered. And you can stick it in the fridge for up to 14 days and use it whenever you like.